Or accept it, ask for just a little, and then just don't drink it. It's perfectly acceptable for it to be poured. Wine, once opened, has to be drunk or disposed of. It's not good typically long term. It might be a drink tomorrow morning. You're not going to keep it in the refrigerator for very long. Okay, so salad has been served. Our next course is fish. So if there's fish or seafood associated with the dinner, that will be next. The plate, entree plate may be here, and a second plate of plated food may be brought to you and placed on top of this. So this plate may stay, or food may be passed and served directly onto this plate. And usually, if we're going to pass and serve, once we have served onto this plate and we have finished our fish, when this plate is taken away, so is the charger. Okay, so basically, this underlying plate will disappear at the end of the fish or seafood course for a very simple reason. You'll notice that there is a little mini course, or what we call an intermezzo, between fish and chicken or pork, the next course of white meat. And that will come to you typically in a parfait type glass or maybe even a champagne. Okay? And that's going to be a scoop of something that looks like frozen lemonade, or it may be raspberry, berry. Usually it's a lemon or a wine derivative ice, which is served. And the purpose of that, sometimes it's a mint-based product. The purpose of that is to cleanse your mouth of the taste of the seafood before we move on to an additional meat course, so that you can enjoy the flavors associated with the other white meats, which typically are pretty delicate, without the pollutant, if you will, of the seafood that you have just eaten. So we've removed all this so that we can put this very long, tall stemmed glass flush against the table where it will be more stable. Is everybody understand? Okay. So basically, this plate would have been removed at the end of the fish dish. The sorbet will be served basically directly onto the table. And the charger goes away, never to be seen again. Until the next meal. All right? If we're having multi-meats and formal dining, oftentimes what we're having here are just meats. Let me say that we're not going to see any vegetables associated with these meat courses until we get to the last meat course. That's when you're going to have any kind of side dish served. Will be with the last meat you're going to receive. Okay? So if we're having chicken or pork and we are not having any red meat or game, then our vegetables will come with the second course of meat. If we are going to have meat or game, we keep marching through the meats until we get to the last one, and that's when we will see our side dishes of beans or potatoes or starches or whatever is going to go with basically the main course. These servings are going to be very small. You can have this huge plate, you're going to have a little something in the center of it. When you're having this many courses, you get a taste, basically, of each of them, not a lot of volume of food, and no accompaniments until you get to the last meat course. Okay? So, fish goes away. Let me say that we would have used our outside fork and our outside knife, basically, for a fish course. And again, in some silverware, that's going to look a little different because fish is flaky and a little harder to maneuver, so the utensils typically have larger tines. And the knife has a large, flat blade, which allows you to manipulate it basically onto your fork if you need to. So that's going to go away with our fish course. We have pork or beef. You see I have two more knives here. I should have one more fork. I'll put one back. Occasionally, waitstaff will bring you an additional fork if there wasn't enough room on the table to put them all. When they serve a course, they may bring you an additional fork. So if I'm having pork, I'm going to use a fork and a regular dinner knife. If I'm having beef or game, most of the time I'm going to have the equivalent silverware of a steak knife. And again, that may have a wider, flatter blade, depending upon what the service looks like. But basically, with each course of meat, I'm going to have a fork and a knife to that course, which goes away with the plate on which it is served. Okay? Again, white wines with our white meats and red wines with our red meats. So after chicken and pork, if we were going to have beef, beef will be served. And if we're going to have game, like venison, bison, something red and heavy, that would be the last course. And that would be the course, basically, with which you would receive a starch, a vegetable, the side dishes, basically, that we typically associate with the meal. When the last course of meat is served, when those red meats are served, this white wine glass will go away, basically, with the last white course, and red wine will be served in the larger wine glass on the table. And again, we're working those wine glasses the same way, from the inside, basically, of our plate, basically out to the outside here. All right. After our red meat has been served, when we are finished, this will have gone away, and when we are finished, think about which side I'm going to put this on. We would lay our silverware basically in the center of the table to say that we're finished with this course. You full yet? Okay. And so when the waitstaff came, they would take plate and silverware away. You still have things on the table. I should say one of these spoons disappeared with your sorbet. All right. You still have a spoon on the table, and you have a spoon and a fork up here at the top. These are your dessert utensils, so that you know. You typically are going to have both of these because you have a dessert and a cheese and a fruit. And either one of these may be used depending on what kind of dessert you have. Okay? But the cheese and the fruit typically requires a fork. And so you're always going to have a fork up here, even if your dessert is ice cream. Okay? Because there's the potential for an additional course behind that. So this will disappear at the end of the meats. And then there's a little pause in the meal and some conversation. In that pause, coffee and tea service will be forthcoming. And so you have a coffee cup, basically over here, which an appropriately set table is not turned over. It's going to be up and ready to be served. And when we say coffee and tea, we're talking about hot tea at this point, not iced tea. Now in the South, we drink iced tea, and a lot of times that takes the place, basically, of this water. Okay? So a lot of times if we're in the South and we're having an iced tea, you're not going to have an ice water glass on the table along with that, usually. That's drunk while you're eating. Coffee and tea, hot, typically served at the end of the meat and prior to the dessert. And a new wine course may be offered. The typical wines for desserts are sweeter, served in much smaller quantity. They're going to come in a small wine glass like your white wine, or in a cordial glass like this if it's a liqueur or a cordial, something that's got a lot of alcohol content. It's typically going to be served in a very small amount. And this is served along with your dessert for you to enjoy. Some people will even combine this with their coffee. Pour it into your coffee if you like it that way. That's fine. You don't have to drink it out of the glass. Your dessert will come typically on a separate serving plate or utensil, maybe a bowl, maybe a small plate like your bread plate, or a plate like what was underneath the soup bowl, depending on what your dessert is and its volume. May be served in any way, and these are the utensils which we're going to use for that purpose. And again, when you are finished, you lay your utensil crosswise, your serving bowl or your plate. That notifies the waitstaff or your hostess that you're finished. Cheese and fruit typically served after dessert, both here in the United States and in Europe, as the final course. With dessert, we have these white wines, including the possibility of champagne. So if this were a formal dinner and we were going to have toast, okay, our guest of honor at the head of the table, maybe they've had some sort of accomplishment, they're getting married or something, and we're going to have a toast associated with the entertainment, the champagne or sparkling wine, Asti Stefani, Prosecco, whatever type of sparkling wine we want to serve, this will typically be served when the dessert course is completed. Okay, so there's no more eating. And there are several different forms, basically, of glass which is used. This is called a flute. And this is much more standard these days for purposes of champagne. It is ideally shaped to